Hey, today is Tuesday, the 9th of May 2023. Yesterday I finished up the tie-down assembly and got that bolted with the bell crank brackets onto the spar. It looks like this. Pretty happy with how it turned out. I did have to do a little bit of learning about torquing bolts into nut plates, drag torque, stuff like that. But anyways, that's done, which means I'm moving on to the rear spar now, and today I'm hoping that I can get all of the rear spar components prepped and primed. A quick look at the plans. On the rear spar, you've got the inboard portion, a reinforcement bar, not unlike the one that's on the vertical stabilizer, a pretty heavy doubler here, doubler at the midpoint, and doubler on the outboard portion of the wing. These need to be final size drilled. These need to be fitted and match drilled. That can be a little bit time consuming because you want to make sure that the fit is right before you start putting holes in pieces. So we'll see how far I get today, but and the weather's really acting up. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's only 11:30 in the morning here, and it looks like late evening out there. The reason I mention this is because of that, I'm losing some shop space over here where my Scotch-Brite wheel is. So a little bit tight quarters today, that might slow me down a little bit. And then if we do get to priming, kind of feels like priming is going to happen here in the garage as well. So anyways, we'll see how far we get today. That's an update, May 9th, 2023. Thanks for watching. Let's have some fun.
Pretty standard parts prep. These spars have a reinforcement fork on the inbound portion that you see me working on there. This is very similar to what you find on the vertical stabilizer. And then on top of that is a doubler on the most inboard portion of it. So it's a really thick piece of material once they're all sandwiched together. And then let's see, edge finishing on these spars. You can see that these spars, rather than having a channel, they're sort of a Z shape. I experimented a little bit with finishing the edges on the Scotch-Brite wheel, but to be honest, it's not very difficult work to use the Vixen file and the edge finishing tool, and then I use that flat file from the chainsaw set to just get the very edge, sort of chamfer the edges just a little bit so there's nothing left on there. They came out really nice. It wasn't that difficult, but like all things prep, it's fairly time consuming. And then just grabbing, some acetone because my intention is to get these completely prepped today. So cleaning off the ink from the printing that somehow leaks through the vinyl and actually gets on the part, plus all of the fingerprints and whatnot. And what you see me doing right there is trying to flatten out the curve that is in these reinforcement forks. Finishing those edges, and also kind of being very careful about making sure that these things are all fitted correctly. What you see me measuring there is that inboard or the mid-wing doubler right there. It's measured a very specific distance off the end of the spar. I don't remember exactly, but I think it's near 40 3/4 inches. What that doubler is going to do is provide some extra meat where the aileron attach bracket is going to mount. And so these doublers are blank. As I recall, they don't have any rivet holes in them, so the end one is pretty easy because you match it so that it's flush with the end and that the flange of that mates against the flange of the spar, and then you use the spar as a drill guide. Obviously, the spar is a drill guide for the mid doubler. You just have to measure precisely to put it in the correct position in the middle of the wing spar. And it is a fairly critical measurement because there are a ton of rivet holes. You can see from all those clecos there are a ton of holes there, including just outboard of that doubler where there's a rivet attach point. And so if you miss the mark by even 1/8 of an inch, you've probably blown your edge distance on one of those parts. And in addition to that, there's a big hole that you have to cut out, an odd-shaped hole that you have to cut out of the middle of those spars. You can see it on the spar right there. That's where the pass-through is for the aileron bell crank tube, something like that. So I'm kind of futzing around with the drill press to try to figure out how to cut these holes cleanly. So what I end up doing is using a unibit, a step bit, to get close to the outside corners of this odd-shaped hole. And I'll show it to you in a second once I get those done. It turned out well. So yeah, unibit to get that shape right there, and then head back over to the bench and with the Dremel tool and a cutting wheel, cut out the bulk of that shape, connect those 3 circles, or disconnect those 3 circles, I suppose, and then with a little Dremel grinding tool, chase it close to the really close to the line. In fact, they came out pretty clean. However, once I do get them fitted onto the spar, and using that hole as a template, which is how you got that in the first place, I find that my cuts are a little bit shy, a little bit smaller than the actual one, so I'll end up removing them and hitting them with the Dremel again. I draw a new line, and then with the Dremel, just widen that hole out a little bit so it's a better fit. Better to creep up on it slowly than it is to blow that whole thing out, because you do want to leave as much material as you can on that doubler, because it's a doubler for a reason. So here, this is just final size drilling all of the holes in the reinforcement fork and the reinforcement plate there. And then also, really importantly, you saw me going along the flange of the spar and final size drilling the holes that run the length of that reinforcement fork. The instructions tell you that once those reinforcement forks are in place, riveted in place, it is nearly impossible to dimple the holes on the spar flange, and you do yourself a favor by going ahead and final size drilling those holes along the flange and dimpling them now, because the next step in this prep process, which will happen in the next video, is getting all of those rear spar components riveted on. Of course, as always, being very careful to make sure that the holes that need to be left open for things like spars and ribs and whatnot are, in fact, so there you see me kind of upsizing those pass-through holes so that they match better. Yep, the weather did stay pretty rough the entire day, which meant that I had to set up my priming table inside the garage. I'm not crazy about that. I'm not that worried about overspray. I'm not doing the work really close to, other parts. It's a lot of fumes and it's a tight space. I'd much rather do that outside. If I felt like I had money to burn, I'd probably get one of those big blow-up paint booths to do the stuff outside, but maybe in the future, definitely not right now. So you can see over in the left hand of the screen, I have set up the makeshift priming table on the 2 sawhorses. There's still plenty of room to do it over there. I just don't like having those fumes float all around. In fact, a couple days later when I cleaned out the workshop, the floor, you can't really see the primer on the floor until you start sweeping it, and you get a pretty good pile of just dark little residue, primer dust. That's I don't know what I'm on speakerphone. I'm talking to somebody, and I have to stop what I'm doing to gesture for the person that I'm speaking to on the phone. So yeah, just getting down to the scuffing and the cleaning and the whatnot for the priming, and then we'll move on to that. So that really, kind of does it for the work on this day. I am glad that I took that crate and kind of made that new priming station, because these, spars are like nearly 10 feet long, and the way that I was doing it before, it would have been pretty awkward. What else is going on here? Today is the 14th, maybe it's the 15th of May, and I just sent an email to Van's Builder Support about these doublers that you see me cleaning and getting ready to prime right there. I mentioned in the previous video, pay close attention to the rivet plan, and because there is a potential gotcha in there, and I did that. I paid attention to it, and I called and asked questions about the potential gotcha, but I think that I still gotcha'd myself on that. So stay tuned. I'll explain more about what I did there. It may not be a big deal at all. I'll explain in more detail once I get an answer back from Van's Builder Support this afternoon. If I do have to replace those doublers, remaking them is not difficult, and they're very inexpensive, and shipping will be cheap as well. So we'll see. Like and subscribe. Thank you.